Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1996 comedy, The Nutty Professor. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Sylvia for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Nutty Professor is actually a remake of a film of the same name starring Jerry Lewis, but I actually haven't seen the original. It just didn't interest me that much. First off, I don't like Jerry Lewis. I'm not a big fan of his comedy or his shtick at all. So that's really one of the main reasons why I haven't even bothered to see it. But this one, I could have some fun with. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a classic or I love it. It's one of those movies that I would say is probably a time waster at best for me. I definitely do have a little nostalgia for the film because I do remember watching it a few times when I was a kid. In fact, it was on this DVD actually. So this is the same DVD that I remember watching the film on when I was younger. I watched it on Blu-ray though for the purpose of this review. But the Blu-ray is like a double feature, and I just decided I would just show this. Also, just a little bit of nostalgia because this is the one that I watched. And what makes this film work in any capacity is Eddie Murphy. This is Eddie Murphy in his prime. This is Eddie just tapping into that potential and that talent that he has that very few actors possess. I mean, Eddie carries this film. He not only plays the protagonist in Sherman Klump, he also plays the antagonist in Buddy Love. And then he also plays an entire family of characters. So if you had a lesser comedian or a lesser actor, I think this could come across as a complete and total train wreck. But because you have Eddie Murphy involved, and this is during his peak, you have something that is not only fairly unique when it comes to films starring a major, well-known comedian, but you also have a movie that can definitely deliver the laughs. The film was directed by Tom Shadyac, and before this, he did Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, which I admit I am a bigger fan of than this. And after this, he did Liar Liar, which I also like more than this. But his direction is still solid. It's still good. He does a good job working with Eddie and his various different personas. He gets some good comic timing out of Eddie and other people in the cast. The way that he shoots Eddie when it comes to him interacting with himself as various different characters is seamless. I think that's something that's pretty underrated when it comes to this direction, because a lesser director would make things look a little bit more chunky, a little bit more clunky. They wouldn't necessarily be as well fitting as they would be otherwise. And the dream sequences, like the scene where Sherman grows to massive, gargantuan size and attacks the city. That was a really well shot sequence, and he did a decent amount of camera movements and pans and zooms and different angles and so on. It wasn't what I would consider a sedentary film when it comes to the direction. It's not just sitting there on the couch and not going anywhere. The direction does get up and move around. So, yeah, I definitely do feel it's a well-directed movie. The script by David Sheffield, Barry W. Blaustein, Tom Shadyac, and Steve Oderkirk. That's a ton of writers. It's there for me. I think this is a pretty average script. And the main reason for that is that while the conflict isn't bad with Sherman Klump creating Buddy Love, and then Buddy Love becoming this thorn in his side and being a absolute pain, that works really well. The romance, though, it didn't really do that much for me. Like, its heart was in the right place between the Clump and Carla, but I don't know. It just wasn't anything that I felt was particularly great. It was just in the middle when it comes to the romance and the love story. And I was more interested in the dynamic between Sherman and Buddy, or even Sherman and his family, than the love story. But that's just me personally. And there were some moments with other aspects of the plot that were a little lacking, like the whole drama about, oh, we gotta show the formula to this one investor, and if we don't get the formula and it's not shown to this one guy in time, we're to lose money for the college. It was just like, it was the kind of thing where it's just typical, and like, how that's gonna end. They're gonna figure it out. They're gonna get the donation. It's all gonna be fine. That kind of thing. And I get why it's there, because you need to have something for Dean Richmond to do, but I didn't really care for that character or the whole stuff with him trying to get the investor and so on. This film is at its best when it's either making you sympathize with Sherman when it comes to his weight, and making him more human and not just this oversized sort of fat Albert kind of caricature. And also when it's relishing in the villainous persona of Buddy Love. That is where this film really shines when it comes to its script. Everything else is just kind of there. It's filler. It's decent at best. It's nothing particularly great. And some of the comedy is also hit and miss. That's another part of the script that is not necessarily as good as it could be. For one, some of the fat jokes are really lazy and just weren't really that funny to me. The scatological humor, I'm not really that big on. Like the fart jokes and the scenes with the hamsters and they're pooping in the dean's coffee and all of that. Like that just doesn't really do it for me when it comes to the comedy. Um, but I will say this: there were some moments at the dinner table with the fart jokes where it got a laugh out of me. But it wasn't really the farts themselves that made me laugh. It was the interactions from the Clumps, specifically the mother, when it comes to uh, uh, the dad ripping ass. Like that was pretty funny. And a lot of that's just Eddie Murphy, because he just improvised a ton of dialogue and a ton of moments in this movie. And it just shows you just how talented of an actor he is, especially a comedic actor, because so much of this film is riding on him. And yeah, like I said, the heart is still in its right place, even though I'm not super big on the love story. I still want Sherman to be happy. I still want him to be loved, because the script did a good job establishing him early on and really making you feel for him. This big guy who's overweight. He's a laughing stock at school. Students laugh at him. He's having a hard time fitting in this world. And the scene where he gets some inspiration with this girl who's willing to go out on a date with him, and then he starts exercising and he starts bettering himself, is a really great sequence. And I really love that scene. And I really like the scenes at the comedy club afterwards, where it takes the fat jokes that are really well written and genuinely funny, where you have Dave Chappelle's character just railing and just absolutely slinging just one insult after another at Sherman at his expense. The script did a good job showing that can be devastating for somebody, that it's not just devastatingly hilarious, that if you're the person who's the target of that, it can be really damaging. And that just added to the sympathy for his character, and it made you understand why he did the experiment and took the risk and ultimately created Buddy Love. And speaking of Buddy Love, like the scene in the comedy club where Buddy Love goes back to the comedy club and puts Dave Chappelle in his place is one of the best sequences in any comedy film, if you ask me. Like, a big reason why this is a time waster for me, despite the fart jokes and all the other stuff that I'm not super big on, is scenes like that. Like, I love that scene. Eddie is such an obnoxious jackass as Buddy Love, but Eddie is so charismatic that he just makes it work so well. And I'm not giving the screenwriters credit for that scene, because that was all Dave Chappelle and Eddie Murphy. Like, that was all them just collaborating and coming up with gems on the spot. So, but yeah, I love that scene. That scene is so hilarious. It is uproariously funny. The rest of the movie, it's fine. It has its moments. A lot of them really have to do with Buddy Love. And, I don't mind the ending. It had a good message to it, and things end on a good note for Sherman, and he is victorious and wins this inner struggle between him and Buddy Love and learns to accept himself. And yeah, I mean, it's not a script that's going to reinvent the wheel, but it does have its clever moments, and there's enough there when it comes to the story that you can connect with to make it a worthwhile film. It really is. The cast, though, in a lot of ways really does make it. I mean, I've sung Eddie's praises. I'll do it again. Like, Eddie Murphy is just excellent in this. He is given a very tall order, a very tall task. We not only want you to star in the movie, but we want you to play the lead in this fat suit. And then we also want you to play the antagonist. And that meant that he had to be in the best shape of his life at the time, because he had to be in really good shape so he could, be Buddy Love. But then he also had to be in equally as good shape to be able to withstand and wear the fat suit for long periods of time during the shoot. And then you have the stuff with the family, which that was Eddie's idea. So that's another reason why Eddie is just so integral to this film's success, because originally they were just going to maybe consider casting some other people or something, or just cut those characters completely out of the script. But Eddie was like, no, like, I'm doing it, where I want to do it. This is something that I think is just going to be so funny, and it's going to be so much fun for me to do, and to be in the makeup and be the mom and be the dad and be the, the older brother, to play all of these different, and the grandmother. And it just shows Eddie's background. He was on SNL. Like, he played a lot of different characters on SNL. And so this was kind of like a return to his SNL days, where he's playing all these characters. And I know he leaned into that a bit too much later in his career, with films like Norbit, for instance. But he's really good in this as these different members of the Klump family. The grandmother in particular really gets me. Like, she's hilarious. And Eddie patterned her after the comedian Moms Mabley. And then you also have Jada Pinkett Smith, who plays Carla Purdy. Of course, she was just known as Jada Pinkett at this point, because she hadn't even, I don't think she had married or even met Will Smith at that time. And she's fine in a multitude of ways. She's a beautiful woman. I'm not necessarily a fan of how she is handling her relationship now, but this is different. This is back in the day when none of that was really happening with her. And I liked her. I thought she had a good bit of charisma. She had a good personality. I felt that she had some good chemistry with Eddie, whether it was as Sherman or as Buddy Love. And the rest of the cast, I mean, other than Dave Chappelle as Reggie Warrington, I mean, you got James Coburn, who plays Harlan Hartley, the guy that they're trying to woo in order to get money for the university. And you got Larry Miller, who plays Dean Richmond. But honestly, it's just Dave Chappelle is the only other performer that I really wanted to mention because he was really fun and made a really significant impact in his few scenes in the film. And now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I might as well mention Eddie again because I honestly almost forgot another character that he portrayed in this. He portrayed the exercise guru guy, uh, uh, Lance Perkins, who is a parody of Richard Simmons. And I know for some people that's controversial because he's in whiteface, but I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I mean, he did an SNL skit where he was in whiteface and that was fine, and I was fine with it. The whole bit here, like it didn't bother me at all. It's a completely different kind of thing compared to other other things. Let's just leave it at that. Yeah, I thought it was funny in that role too, as the Richard Simmons parody. But yeah, just just a good cast, even though the majority of the cast is just Eddie Murphy. But it's still a decent enough cast. The film also features some cinematography by Julio Macat, and it's got its moments. There are some good scenes like the dream sequences, or one scene in particular I thought was really well shot and looked good when Sherman he's he's standing outside the porch after the date at Scream went horribly awry and it's raining and he's just standing outside in the rain and he's putting the I think he puts like a newspaper or something over his head and then walks down the steps. Like the way that scene was shot was really good because it just emphasized so much the sadness that he was feeling. Um with the gloomy cinematography and the way that the angle was used, and it was just a really nice looking shot. And there's a few other shots like that throughout the film where the cinematographer really tapped into what Shadyac was trying to do as a director. The editing by Don Zimmerman is also pretty solid, pretty serviceable for a comedy. Has some good timing, has some good energy to it. The music by David Newman, very cliched. A very cliched kind of score with just your typical sort of upbeat tones and musical compositions and just really kind of sounded like your typical kind of underdog score at times for like your underdog sports movie. But then you would have a couple moments where it's zany and bouncing off the walls because of, Buddy Love and all that other stuff. And it was just a score that is very light and it definitely did fit the film, but I didn't really feel it added a whole lot. And in fact, there were a couple scenes where it was a little too schmaltzy for my tastes. But that's just me. And the film has a pretty, slim running time. It's only like 96 minutes. It's not like it's a girthy film. Like despite, the fat suit and all of that. Like it's not a movie that's like 2 hours or anything. So it goes by at a pretty good pace. And speaking of the fat suit, I want to give Rick Baker and his crew an immense amount of credit for what they did in this movie. I think they won an Oscar for this, and honestly, I could see why. Because of the sheer level of difficulty when it comes to doing the makeup for this. Not only do you have to have the Sherman Klump makeup and make that look believable, and on top of that, have enough mobility and movement that Eddie can actually emote and act in it. you also have to have these other suits and this other makeup. So Eddie can play the mom, and Eddie can play the grandmother, and Eddie can play the older brother of Sherman, and then Eddie can play the dad, and Eddie can play the Richard Simmons parody character. So these are all really complicated makeup uh, projects just by themselves. So to have all of them all in one movie is pretty impressive, and it's really a testament to the skill of Rick Baker. So yeah, that's another big part of why it's a time waster for me, is just to see Rick Baker's work, because I'm a big fan of his work as a makeup effects artist, and I know that he definitely had some fun doing this, because he's mentioned in interviews that this is, one of his favorite projects that he did. I mean, he did the makeup. I think he might have done the makeup again for the second movie. So that just shows you how much of a good time he had doing it. And he just loved working with Eddie, and Eddie loved working with Rick, and just seemed like a really good, almost symbiotic relationship between makeup effects artist and star. And there's just some great outtakes as well when it comes to this movie that are funny. You have a pretty funny movie when even the outtakes and the bloopers are pretty funny. And the Nutty Professor is no exception to that. So yeah, I mean, even though I do find it to be funny, at times laugh out loud hilarious, it's just one of those movies where there are certain aspects of it and certain elements that I'm not super big on. So it's just one of those movies where I could put it on and enjoy it for Eddie Murphy and for the fat suits and the makeup effects and for Buddy Love and for other little things here and there. But my enjoyment is inconsistent with the movie because of the abundance of fart jokes and other things that just don't really align with my personal taste. But it's still a film that I think is definitely a little bit better than some people make it out to be. I mean, there are a lot of people who are kind of going hard on this film nowadays. Like, it's just some dated piece of crap, like Norbit or whatever. And I'm like, I don't think it's on that same level of bad. Um, it's definitely a lot better than something like that. So I would say if you are into like zany, over the top comic book kind of comedies, and you're a fan of Eddie Murphy, this is definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it already. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of The Nutty Professor, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.